now busy with coating processes to meet the requirements of a high-end fashion with an eye to innovation and sustainability. She's going to present a study on the nickel release on stainless steel 316L, which is usually considered as safe. Yet, the electrode deposition process could cause an important nickel release. Her presentation is pointing out that the nickel release in the case of stainless steel 316L can be reduced using superficial treatments, maintaining the passivation state, especially when electrode deposition techniques are used for applications where nickel exposure is to be strictly controlled. Mrs. Roberta Emanuele. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your kind invitation. Thank you very much to all of you for being here. I shall be talking about the process optimization for stainless steel 316 with an innovative approach. I'm going to provide you with some background information. Stainless steel is an alloy which is made of chromium and aluminum and iron. It could be recycled. Stainless steel is a specific type of steel, including 10.5% of the maximum of chromium. Actually, a minimum, says the speaker, of 10.5, a maximum, and the maximum is 1.2. Chromium oxide external state makes it resistant to corrosion. Thanks to this characteristic, this is a material which is widely used in many different industries, in the building sector, in the chemical industry, in the aerospace industry. To classify stainless steel is the American Steel Institute, and usually a 3-digit number refers to the strength, the most important alloying metals, and then there are references to other metals of the alloy that refer to the strength of the different type of steel. And then at the end, there's a letter adding information. L in this case stands for low carbon. AISI 316L is a specific type of stainless steel. It is a chromium nickel alloy containing 65% of iron, chromium ranging between 16 and 18, and nickel from 10 to 15%. This type of steel is also used for medical purposes. It is not widely coating because, again, the coating is very difficult in the case of this type of steel. The chromium oxide layer makes it resistant to corrosion, so much so that coating is very difficult. Usually, to coat this type of steel, nickel wood is used. This is a material that has many additional problems. Once in touch with this material, different percentages of men and women develop allergies. This is why it was banned by the European Union in the case of the nickel release being higher than 0.5 micron per centimeter over the week. This is the amount which may provoke an allergic reaction. There's a law regulating the use of this material. It is UNI EN 1811/2023. and the threshold levels are 0.2 micrograms per centimeter per square centimeter per week, with the highest level being a 0.5 microgram per square centimeters in the case of objects that are constantly in touch with the skin, i.e. necklaces and rings. Stainless steel 316L, in case of a saline environment, is subject to corrosion, but the steel 316L, Telkel, does not release any nickel compound. In case of it being coated and galvanized, it might be subject to release because in the case of 316L, there's some 12% of nickel. So once the chromium oxide layer is removed, the release is promoted. In this paper, we've analyzed the nickel release after different electrochemical stages from the preparation of the sample on, to understand how nickel is released and to find solutions to stop this release. The flow diagram can be summed up as here. So the samples were characterized by means of different technique. After the week of testing, the samples were rinsed and raised and were analyzed with the SEM microscope to look at the amount of nickel released, and the solution has been analyzed with an MPAES test. Let's have a look at the results of this release test. Based on the legislation, samples are to be cleaned with a solution, and then they should be suspended within a container where a solution of artificial sweat is included with sodium chloride 0.5%, 1.1% of urea, and 0.1 of lactic acid. The pH should be equal to 6.1 to 0.1, and the added solution should be proportional to the sample of the area. 1 square centimeter, 1 milliliter of the solution. So the samples are left within the solution for a week. At the end of the week, this solution is analyzed with MPAES to understand the quantity of nickel per square centimeters released over the week. We looked at the literature. This is a SEM test after the images that was taken after the test. We know that stainless steel 316L does not release nickel unless retreated. We look at the electrochemical cleaning. This is a process which is always resorted to for adequate coating. Usually it is performed for 60 seconds. And to look at the role of this electrochemical polishing, we looked at 3 potential solutions: 1, 20, and 100 for square decimeter. And with a sulfuric acid solution is used. 2 sets of samples have been identified. One was neutralized with a solution and one was not. But irrespective of the current being used, none of these samples yielded or released any nickel. As a matter of fact, there are no morphological, no composition variations after the test. So we may clearly say that the polishing, the degreasing process does not lead to any release. In the case of oxygen getting in touch, in that case, something might happen. We then looked at the role of the coating. As I said earlier on, the solution which is mostly used is the wood nickel bath, which is a galvanic bath with the chlorhydric acid and nickel chloride. It is extensively used and has been since the 50s, and it is still being used even after the adoption of the legislation. In my work, we've looked at the nickel-free solution, which was gold-based, that has been studied to have the deposition of a metal on the external layer. These two baths was compared to analyze the nickel release, and they enabled to understand what were the decisive factors and to see to what extent the coating, the galvanic process, as well as the surface treatment may have an impact on nickel release, as, for example, superficial roughness. The first part of this research has analyzed the roughness. We looked at the roughness of two different samples, one of a raw stainless steel 316L, and the other one had been treated. You see the difference between the two samples. One is much better polished than the other one. And the FM image is very representative. If you look at the data for SQ and the two data are very different. The first set of samples was prepared using as a substrate stainless steel 316L. We then looked at the performance of the wood nickel bath. The first set of samples have been submitted to this bath, depositing gold, 0.3 micron layer of gold at 24 carats. These are the SEM images of the samples before the release test, and these are the images after the test. As for the results, these are all average of a 3 repetition, and as you see, the release tests are higher than allowed by the law. For the samples produced with the golden layer, the figure is halved. You might think that the nickel is released by the substrate of wooden nickel, and yet this is counterintuitive because nickel is only included in the substrate. So this means that the superficial activation and the removal of the chromium oxide that was necessary for the coating made it more liable to release nickel. In the SEM message, you see that there are many cracks on the surface, so probably nickel is released by these very quick cracks, where there is a problem with adhesion, and that could be due to an excessive roughness of the sample. We then use the other type of 316L steel that was polished, and you see that the results are quite clear. In the case of the samples that were subject to coating with wood nickel, we don't comply with the rule, whereas if we use gold, the results are much better. We can therefore say that superficial roughness of the sample bears importantly on the final result in terms of nickel release. We then performed additional studies using the polished stainless steel 316L and we've resorted to galvanic layering, which is used in the case of custom jewelry, that is copper, bronze, palladium. The samples were then tested. These are the images after the release test. And unexpectedly, the results were good for both sets of samples. There are very high results in terms of nickel release. In the other case, we have 1, 2, 5. In this SEM messages, there are cracks visible, as well as results of the corrosion. That white part is copper that is released by the layers underneath the substrate. The data we obtained on the samples with the final layer of gold gives us good result. 1.25 is the measurement of the gold layer. In the case of the samples galvanized with nickel, the results of the are similar. In the case of the gold layer, there's one sample that released less nickel complying with the law 0.025. And this increased the standard deviation, coming very close to the average value. Based on this study, we may say that had we assumed that there was a nickel dispersion in the intermetallic phase, was wrong, because the time since the preparation of the sample and after the week of release is not enough to enable nickel to get across the galvanic coating. The presence of this coating seems to further promote the release of nickel. And this is probably due to the fact that we introduce additional variables in terms of of the lattice tensions. We then prepared another set of samples following the same cycle as before, with the only exception being the final deposition of gold to get to the final thickness of 1 micron. So again, the samples were checked and the release tests were extremely good. Indeed, they both comply with the existing limits, so there's no variation detected with the SEM in terms of standard deviation. The thickness of gold, of course, bears importantly on the release of nickel. In the literature, we read that with layers less than 0.8, we have a great porosity. And you see the image of a sample that has been coated with a 0.8 micron of gold. And on the right-hand side, you see that pores are visible. And it is probable that from these pores, the nickel gets to the substrate. So a higher, thicker layer prevents this pore from occurring and prevents nickel from getting to the surface. The samples with 0.2 microns are very ruined. You see the copper deriving from corrosion that stain the sample. On the right-hand side, we see that the sample are much better. So porosity bears importantly on the release of nickel. But there is another factor to be considered, which is perhaps even more important, and that is the removal of chromium oxide. To further confirm this, another set of samples had been prepared using PVD technology, as physical vapor deposition. So we put gold on the steel without removing oxide, and we deposit only on one side, leaving one part non-covered. So we tested the samples, and all turned out to be within the limits as set by the legislation. So based on all the tests performed, we believed we have better understood how nickel release works. Stainless steel 316L doesn't lead to any release. Not even after the decreasing and polishing do we get any nickel release because there is something protecting the release. In the case of a metal being added and the previous removal of chromium, in that case you cannot have a second time passivation. Using thicker layers of gold, avoiding any porosity, we can prevent nickel from being released because there are no gateways for its coming out. Gold deposition by means of physical vapor deposition proved to play an important role. Roughness also bears importantly. Indeed, rougher surfaces are much more likely to release nickel as compared to polished samples. With the galvanic deposition, you may have different currents. In the case of more current, there's going to be a thicker layer. And in the case of high surface roughness, you're going to have a lot of potential corrosion. To conclude, stainless steel 316L and stainless steel as such is an extremely valuable material. Thanks to its chemical and physical properties, it could be recycled. Galvanic coating, when nickel-free processes are used, could all the same lead to nickel release. We have to have a polished surface with no roughness. We could use gold as a coating layer so as to reduce the release. The release indeed is being caused by the removal of the chromium level, which is necessary for the covering layer to be in closer connection with the underlying material. So basically, we succeeded in the limiting nickel release, understanding also how to better improve in the future. Should you be interested in carrying out further research, you can find a paper, our study, on this magazine. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you very much for having me.
Grazie alla dottoressa Emanuele.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Emanuele. Let's proceed with the second presentation of the afternoon, which will be by Dr. Mario Scarpa, with the title Design and Innovation, Shaping Responsible Change. Dr. Mario Scarpa, for more than 20 years, has been active in the field of industrial design and product communication, paying special attention to fashion and its social and environmental impact. His experience includes several fields, and he works together with many fashion companies in Italy and abroad, integrating technology, research, materials, and design. In 2022, he founded Humanumest, a benefit company promoting a more responsible fashion industry through the circular design model of responsible design thinking, promoting the use of skills and creative tools at every organizational level. His presentation will address the crucial role of design in technological innovation and sustainability, highlighting the way how new technologies are redefining creative and productive processes. The integration of advanced instruments such as AI, immersive situations, and 3D printing is actually going beyond the traditional production limits. However, innovation cannot neglect responsibilities. Therefore, the choice of materials, managing the life cycle, and responsible communication are fundamental elements. Mrs. Kappa, you have the floor. Good afternoon, everybody. This morning we heard about rethinking processes and products. And I believe that design has a very important role, which is that of facilitating this process. We frequently tend to think of design as of something that tries to sort out problems, find a technology for a certain shape, a material for certain parameters. Conversely, I believe that design must be a source of solutions to design in an awareness status. So, which are the tools that today can facilitate the transition? There are many, and they're evolving. Then we will try to see which is the role of designers and how this role should evolve. We're going through a historical moment, witnessing a radical innovation which is unparalleled so far. Therefore, it is necessary to understand which are the suitable tools and how skills can be acquired. But what is design? Design could be defined as changing existing situations into preferred ones. And this must be intentional. It's an intentional process. I love this definition. It was given by a Nobel Prize winner, not a designer. And it includes the ameliorating direction, which is different from stylism, which is one of the woes of our industry. Still looking at the past, we can identify the 10 principles of good design enunciated by Dieter Rams. Design is innovative, but it is also honest, long-lasting, and environmentally friendly. You cannot neglect these aspects because these are part of our design culture. Dieter Rams has inspired Apple, for instance, that based its design on all this. Dieter Rams was responsible of the Brown Design Center. That was the equivalent of Apple at that time. Design is also changing in time, predominantly based on the degree of freedom. 2D design is graphic design, but then 3D design came all the way up to the social innovation design, going through system design. This is a wider way of looking at design as a tool, not as a discipline. Sometimes I teach at economics university, where attempts are made of finding a technique for alternative solutions. The European community is quite specific about this. Up to 80% of products' environmental impacts are determined during the design phase. This also applies to the social impact, I believe, which should be also considered when you design. Designers, R&D managers, innovation managers are just like this gentleman. We look at the future without any certainty because we're actually designing the future. But there are some certainties and some obligations. The legal framework is very confused. It keeps evolving, but there are some certain points. When you move from a directive, from a guideline to a rule, we know that this will enter into force. And the rules on eco-design and the packaging and packaging waste regulation are two very strong themes that will involve more and more style centers, R&D departments, and companies at large. This is particularly relevant for jewelry because sooner or later jewelry will be involved in this. And we know that packaging and progress go hand in hand in jewelry, one explaining the other. So which tools do we have? Let's try and classify them. The project, the processes, the materials, the communication, and of course the factor that makes all this communicable and feasible, the people. People must be involved. So back to the first question we asked. What is innovation? This is Schumpeter's concept. Schumpeter is a theoretician of innovation that has given shape to the concept of innovation. So innovation as the creative destruction. And the creative destruction we are viewing today truly is a paradigm shift. It is a paradigm shift. Moving from incremental innovation, little by little, adding features with a gradual improvement, to something that is totally radical. So, which tools? Well, talking about my job, we have moved from the pencil, a fantastic tool that allows you to do everything, masterpieces, that truly do become icons, especially in fashion and in jewelry, or watches. So from the pencil, we have moved to superpowers. Design can be done in shared environment, remotely. You can see the girl wearing the visor. You can even define the context of the environment if you have to design a shop, a point of sale. Or I may want to go into the detail of a piece of jewelry and I zoom it so much that I go inside the jewel. Then, of course, we have generative AI, which, as we have seen, has taken on different forms. We might think that it is no longer necessary to be able to draw to be a designer. As a matter of fact, I believe that AI, generative AI, is a democratic tool because it gives many people in the company the opportunity to state their own point of view. Then we have 3D scanning with tools that are available to everybody. Tools that are innovative because they are generally available. And this is a victory. Many students use all the tools that you can see there. And of course, 3D printing, additive manufacturing, additive technologies for prototyping and small size productions. They merge the concept of idea with the concept of materials in a very short period of time. Time and space are compressed. Let me give you an example. This is not a copy from a real item, but it is an image that has been generated in 2 minutes, starting from a drawing on a napkin. That's a level of detail that you can obtain in a very, very short time. It is pretty amazing. I've been dreaming of this for years. So designers have fewer barriers. It is possible to do many more things in a shorter period of time. So I have tried to give you an idea of the typical workflow in my industry. We try to understand the market. We try to define the brief. Then there is a concept development, concept engineering, sourcing, production, communication, and customer engagement. I'm skipping one of the most important factors, which is a supply chain, because I know that there will be another presentation about this. So I'm not anticipating anything. Let me focus on the design phase. During concept creation, there are several steps. Even though one tends to think that designing is sketching, 3D modeling, and rendering. That's a common belief. But workflows has dramatically changed from 2023 to 2024. In 2023, just to give you an idea, this is what happened. I mean, this shift has taken place in about 6 months in my industry and in my company. We used to start with sketching and drawing on paper, modeling, and then rendering. You couldn't model everything and you couldn't render everything, even though immersive modeling technologies compress the timing significantly. But that meant quite a lot of time. I focused predominantly on jewels and watches, but also spectacles and accessories, characterized by a different degree of complexity. So, to evaluate a project, it takes 8 to 20 hours of work. That was year 2023. In 2024, this has considerably shrunk. If, with a drawing on a napkin, I can make a shell in 5 minutes, it is very easy to explore and compress the time needed to obtain the item. So 1 or 2 hours. It could take a little bit longer, but for sure the timing has been reduced significantly. And here you can see also some of the tools that can be used to achieve the result. However, luckily, designers do not only draw. And faster does not necessarily mean better. Sometimes it only means more. And this is why I have to come to terms with efficacy and efficiency. Efficiency has increased significantly. I have more ideas. I'm more productive during the creative phase. But what about the efficacy? That's the present workflow. We start from an idea. The rendering is immediately quick. I reuse it, I create fractals of ideas, trees of ideas that can submerge my table in a short period of time. So you can have 70, 80, 200 proposals in 1 week, even less. And now the problem is selecting. When I design with a pencil, I make decisions. I have to decide what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. What fits my brand and what does not fit my brand. So a series of micro decisions, and those 8 to 20 hours are used to select and guide the creative process. Well, here it is like going in the brain cortex of a designer or several designers. So selection becomes the main topic. I'm skipping IP implications, which of course are not neglectable. They've been investigating to make sure that there is no danger of plagiarism. Is AI an output or an input? Probably it is both. If we manage to use it in these flows, we can enhance our way to design, going beyond any barrier of material or rendering or visualization. However, there's another important part of concept exploration. It's the in-depth analysis to try and find the ideal solution. These ideas must be made tangible. I remember talking with a watch executive. He said, I am concerned with what the customer feels when wearing the watch. with the eyes shut. Connection with the consumer, the feeling of wearing something, metal, how the metal fits on your skin, how large a watch is, how soft it is. It is very important to be able to perceive all this in a short period of time. Therefore, we can also add 2 extra phases in our workflow. The explorative one, during which prototypes are made, and prototypes are almost the definitive version because, say, they are related to a catwalk, an event. Prototyping is useful, can take place step by step with polymeric materials first, and then we can use metal alloy. And there is also the possibility of generating small productions. Of course, there is an infinite variety of choices. I've used polyjet prints to manage transparency in resins. And this was combined with metal prototypes. Binder jetting is a very promising technology. It helps us reduce energy consumption and recover part of the powder. And it also allows us to design better. Co-creation, decentralized manufacturing, complex geometries. Let's not forget that 3D printing has paved the way to a huge amount of possibilities, including geometries which could otherwise not be accomplished. And you can also leverage on mass customization, mass personalization. There are many different ways to come in contact with the consumer. This is what we've done about 3 years ago for a fashion show. We obtained a texture which is very complex in a very short period of time. This was done locally with a 3D printer. The result was greatly appreciated. And this gives you an idea of how fashion can relate to technology. This connection between technology and fashion can be found in other industries. We tend to view our industry as a closed one, characterized by tradition and competence. Open innovation, however, can sometimes show different examples. Shoes, for instance. Shoes are a good example to understand what you can do with the 3D printing. Zellerfeld is a company that has focused on this, collaborating with Louis Vuitton Group, Aaron Preston, and Nike. And one of their messages was, now anyone can be a sneaker designer. Pretty vague, but able to give everybody the possibility to exercise your own creativity beyond the physical limit of your own skills. Shoes are a functional item that must compress and strain. So, with one single material, it was possible to simulate different levels of resistance. Using multiple materials, it would have been very complex. And today, it is possible to print with a 3D printer basketballs, parts of shoes, and fashion is moving away from glues. There are many no-glue projects. Let's continue with shoes. In the past, we heard about virtual jewelry, the metaverses of jewelry. Certainly, this is very interesting industry. NFTs and several other technologies have proven to be very appealing to consumers. So Nike bought Artifact, a marketplace workshop for intangible assets. Since January, Artifact stopped working, was closed down. So this is a clear sign of how significant experience is. This does not mean that you have to keep away from these assets. They can be valuable in terms of traceability of digital assets with the blockchain. But this is for sure a very strong signal. So summarizing value creation, thanks to innovation and technology, and thanks to the adoption of these tools, it is possible to understand the market better. The market must be listened to and analyzed, and this can be done today with very powerful tools that are able to process a huge quantity of data. We can design better, and this is a founding pillar of the responsibility of design in the project. A low impact and responsible design. We can produce better because if I can be stock free, if I can have on-demand manufacturing, then we're moving to the no factoring, no waste concept that further increases the efficiency of a company's activities. And finally, educate better. We must educate the consumer in the best possible way.
Ti arriva attraverso un packaging che...
Once the product has been sold and sent to the customer, it is also very important to educate the customer regarding how the product was made, who made it, and which values it represents. There is a lot of talk about corporate ethics embodied in the mission and in the core values, but it is difficult to translate this into a product. Consumers must be aware of what they buy, and designers must be aware of how they design. Let's now move to the designer now. How should designers rethink their role? Well, first of all, designers must be viewed as holistic, because if the execution phase has become shorter, there is a lot of free time. How am I going to use my time? Well, it is important to have the information that support awareness, and events like this one are very useful for a designer to understand what is needed, what should be explored, and when should technology be given a shape. You need to be visionary. It is not necessary to produce more products. Only because my competitor is doing that, I have to do it too. No, it doesn't go that way. And it is necessary to follow and support all the actors of innovation, being a steward, a person that explains the potentials and how they can be applied in a process that is already compressed by brief timing, costs, and rhythms. There are three different ways to use the time you save. And you can see it up there in the top right corner. Some entrepreneurs might think, okay, I can reduce the development time, so I want to have more. I can reduce the development time. I need fewer employees. But when you have to make a decision,
Meno persone che ho bisogno, ma ho bisogno di persone più informate.
It is not that I need fewer people, but I need better educated people. Because they need to know the technology, and we know that technology is evolving. There is no one technology fitting everything. We do not have one AI tool that is fine for everything. No single modeling is good for everything. And then, of course, we must be aware of the impact of what we create. Life cycle assessment, OpenCA, based on Baker Dance, are concepts that are not sufficiently widespread in the design industry. They're still too far away. Conversely, bringing designers, style offices, product offices closer to this opportunity is something very important, considering the time that we're saving. And then, of course, talking about sustainability, a word we hear all too often, we tend to focus on negative externalities. Or what we don't do well that must be corrected, that must be compensated, that must be traced. It is true, it must be traced. But we tend to forget about the power of a jewelry product, especially if we talk about symbols, culture, values. When we talk about an item that tells a story, and that's a big value of jewelry, better conceived concepts that have been developed in a more aware way, and it is a precise responsibility of designers to be aware. Well, all this can have a significant impact on the market and on society. These are some examples from different industries. It is not just a prosthesis, a product, an accessory. It is something that gives me an emotion. And the true meaning of being a designer is to be able to choose, to find orientation, and to be meaningful. Thank you.
Grazie al dottor Scarpa.
Many thanks, Mr. Scarpa. Now we move to the last presentation of today by Mrs. Ada Rosa Balzan, who is an expert in sustainability. She has a long-standing experience, more than 20 years, and she is the CEO of Barba SPA, and she is responsible for sustainability for the tourist Italian society. She is a professor at different universities and business schools. She is a member of various national and international negotiating commissions, and she was a speaker at the Festival of Economics of Trento, and she's an expert in sustainability. And her presentation is called Sustainability, a must-have regulatory framework and key elements of sustainability. Sustainability associated not only with environmental aspects, but also associated with environmental, social, and governance ESGs. It is then an indispensable instrument for companies, and it should be included in the management of risks. During her presentation, Anna Rosa Balzan will focus on the current situation of sustainability, starting from regulatory obligations, but also opportunities coming out or deriving from the market. And she will speak about the importance of transparent communication, also with reference to jewelry and fashion, sectors which are increasingly focused on ethical and sustainable supply chain. Thank you and good afternoon. So my presentation was already made. So I would like to speak about the Italian and European situation. After the COVID pandemic, we have seen a strong acceleration towards the elaboration of various regulations, directives, etc. And I would like to differentiate between what is compulsory and what is something that should be implemented because it is something that is appropriate. So there are companies, however, which do not have the turnover and the size, but nevertheless, they belong to a value chain, and so they have to understand that this can be an opportunity. So if before the COVID pandemic we were in a situation which we can call nice to have, now we are in a situation which we could define as a must-have situation. Sustainability is compared with the situation of IT introduction 20 years ago, which changed our working habits, shortened the distances. But as this article of Corriere della Sera says, those who understand that this can be an opportunity will be ahead of everybody, because what is important is to start to work with a view to adopting these rules. These are some articles underline the importance of this topic. Europe is insisting a lot on that, saying that it is not an invitation but a need for survival. And then it's important to communicate sustainability. I will speak about greenwashing and the directive on communication. And it is possible to report and about the sustainability declarations. Well, we see that ESG is very important, and so governance and social goals are among the most important ones because they are goals which are appropriate for the company. And we see that last year there has been an increased attention for sustainability. And the board of directors have to, of course, increasingly focus on sustainability. And then there is also a risk because now the sustainability balance sheet will be included into the normal balance sheet. And so we will need to have a very accurate reporting of the activities carried out of companies. Well, several studies highlight that sustainable companies are more and more solid. And earlier on, the focus was made on a balance sheet. Now companies ask us to carry out ESG evaluations. Now, sustainability and governance, also in Italian companies, while there is an acceleration towards these topics. And we see this Global Risk Report 2023, which says that 25% of the market value of a company can be attributed to its reputation. And very often, a reputation is connected with the management of sustainability issues. And indeed, 87% of managers are mainly concerned about the management of reputational risks. Because while in the area of technical issues, there are very clear-cut procedures, in this area, it is more difficult to implement crisis management answers related to ESG. Now, this is an article of Milano Finanza, 2019, where we see that these issues were already at the forefront, and it was underlined that ESG rating would become an indispensable pillar for each company and product. So not only in the banking and insurance sector, but in all companies, because this is sort of synonymous with quality. So when a company underlines various issues such as packaging, supply chain elements, attention to people, well, there's also a focus on these issues. So it's very important to have this perception and do a sort of a checkup so that you can focus on your sustainability issues. So what does sustainability mean? Well, let's start from what it doesn't mean. A company which says, I have photovoltaic panels, okay, that's an important aspect, but this sustainability is not limited to that. Or others say that they removed plastic bottles from the company. Okay, it's important, but it is an aspect related to waste management. A plastic bottle is included in the overall management of the company. And during the COVID pandemic, we went back to glass bottles. So we are certainly going in a specific direction, but it is not only that. You have to spread the culture about the use and the correct impact of sustainability, and be aware that every action can have an impact. And then there is also the organic products which are associated with sustainability and zero-kilometer products. Well, technically, this is not the case because zero-kilometer has a specific meaning, that is the compliance with a given protocol, the use or non-use of some products. But paradoxically, if I have unregular workers, I don't have respect of people. So paradoxically, I have a product which is organic in terms of its certification, but which is not sustainable. And the same applies to zero-kilometer products, which certainly reduce the impact of CO2. But then if I do not comply with the social or governance issues, well, that service cannot be sustainable. And then other examples, a product, a natural product is not necessarily sustainable. A stone-made piece of paper is not a sustainable product. So eco, bio, natural, well, these are words which in the new directive of green claims are defined in the greenwashing chapter. 100% natural, well, this is one of the most used definitions, but also arsenic is 100% natural, so it's not an extra value. And the same applies to fashion. We know the impact of fashion. So if we think of a marble fabric, well, one thing is capsule, but one thing is to have a production of millions of suits, mining marble and producing suits. While there are also favorable examples, for example, orange made fabrics. So from the recycling from the orange waste, it has been possible to get fabrics. So those who produce orange juice would have a certain waste with all the price consequences, but in this way it is possible to recycle the waste. Well, this is Vicenza Oro, a page of the fair of last year. So you see ethics, sustainability. also in the jewelry sector. This is an article, July 2024, which says sustainable jewels for 80% of Italians. It is an interesting product, but it is not so well known. It has big potentials to be explored, and so we see this article by Panbianco, which highlights the importance of sustainability also in this sector, but only 40% of Italians is aware of what sustainable jewel means. Shall we look at the packaging? Shall we look at the value chain or the company? Is it a family company? So there is a whole series of assessments which have to be made because in theory there is certainly a lot of interest for this new market, but only 21% of people actually say that they can identify a sustainable product. Another sector is this one, the jewelry sector in the US, where we see that the Gen Z, the Generation Z, the millennials are sustainable natives, and they are very much careful about this. And then other brands which are focusing on that. Tiffany, for example, which was involved in some scandals about diamonds, has created a very much controlled supply chain and also a foundation which deals with sustainability in the world of jewels. And then Prada, which set up a line in 2022 of recycled gold. Well, this is not so innovative because gold melting is something that we know already, but we never saw it as a sustainability procedure. So sometimes, we should really have an in-depth assessment of our company and of what we do, because there are practices which perhaps are already there, and that you can start to work on. A few months ago, Kering launched this award, which is called the Kering Generation Award X Jewelry, to promote the combination of sustainability and innovation in the world of jewelry, thus involving universities and startup companies. Now, let's have a look at the supply chain. The CSDD involves all the companies, and this has been the first time that a European directive has an obligation to be responsible for the whole supply chain. It will be implemented starting from 2026. It will be addressed to all European companies with more than 1,000 staff and a world turnover greater than 450 million euros. Well, we belong to this supply chain, so it's very important to identify the elements which can incorporate these policies. It's important to assess and identify the negative impacts of our policies. It's important to set up a procedure for the management of claims and the application of policies, because we have three obligations: the duty of diligence towards the environment, towards people, and then we have the duty of prevention. So we go back to the principle of responsibility, and then the duty to check. It's no longer enough to demonstrate that I sent a file to be filled in, but also the results of those tests. So I didn't only send the checklist, which was then signed and sent back, but I checked that the situation is appropriate. And then The CSDDD is connected with the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, where companies are called smaller companies are involved. In Italy, it is 50 million euros turnover, 150 staff, and this, of course, requires an in-depth analysis. And then there is the issue of fines and sanctions. Fines up to 5% of the global turnover, and then stopping of activities when it has been ascertained that there are negative impacts in terms of social damage and environmental damage. And then attention is given not only to greenwashing, but also to social washing. Well, the European Commission has already worked on that. They carried out an investigation in 2022 looking at the websites of the various European companies and how they communicate about environmental policies. And almost 60% of websites do not provide sufficient information and data to check the truthfulness of what they say. And even 42% believe that the communication is cheating information. The three growing trends are more awareness by consumers and search for information. As we said, young people have a growing purchasing power, buying power, and they are sustainable natives. They are very much focused on these issues. They look for the benefits in terms of environment and social issues. And then there is a new area of analysis, that is competitors which ask for analysis on the claims of other companies. So without waiting for the introduction of the Green Claim Directive, there are already some laws in Italy which speak about these issues, and there have already been verdicts in Italy. Now, Agicom, for example, in Italy, introduced Article 12 about commercial communication. Well, I've been dealing with sustainability for 25 years, and when I said that this is an exact science, people did not believe that. But if we look at this article dating back to 10 years ago, well, it speaks about excessive use or misuse of commercial information, and it says that commercial communication should be based on scientific data. So when I make a statement, I need to have internationally renowned data, and I have to specify the type of product I'm referring to. So if I speak about packaging, I have to specify that. The reviewing procedure can be carried out by AGCM. It can be made upon reporting of a consumer, of a competitor. Fines range between 5,000 to 5 million euro, depending on the severity and the duration of violation. But the image damage is certainly the one which is more difficult to repair. And then there are other messages which may not be correct. For example, let's save the planet. Well, if we can reduce overheating, well, we certainly gain from that. The planet will continue to exist, but we will not continue to exist. So it's necessary to have more accurate messages. then often in communication campaigns, we read, buy this jewel and I'll give you this plant so you compensate for the emissions. Well, the European Commission has intervened and said that those who want to compensate the emissions of one's own product or one's own organization first has to demonstrate to have carried out a carbon footprint and reduce what they could reduce. And only by demonstrating that they cannot reduce any other thing, they can compensate for the residual emission. So there should be a scientific and rigorous procedure. Zero Impact. This is a book that I wrote because sometimes we have important trademarks which state that they are zero impact. Well, this is not true. The fact that we are here means that we have already generated an impact. So please pay attention to these messages, which are very appealing, but not accurate and not correct. Now, the new regulation on eco-design was already mentioned by the colleague earlier on. And we have the regulation on eco-design and the directive favoring the repair and the duration of goods because it's important to think that also an enduring product is a sustainable product, and jewelry is an example because jewels are often passed on from grandfathers or grandmothers to the nephews, etc. And then the new regulation on packages and packaging waste. For example, in the world of fashion, there was the habit of destroying unsold goods in order to keep the value of the collection. In high fashion, this was a common practice. And then correct methods of disposal and then traceability. Well, the issue of packaging is very important. It should be lower than 15 micron because there are residues that are contained also in what we eat. Now, sustainability balance sheet. This is a great opportunity for many companies. The new directive has changed the approach to the balance sheet, which now has a perspective approach because I have to report data about my strategy for the next 3 years. This was the approach of the European Commission. You see the various standards, 20 million euros, turnover 40 million euros, average number of staff 250. So there are many companies which are working on that and they are preparing their first balance sheet. These are the main steps, and many companies have already started the procedure in order to draw up this type of balance sheet. So there are many companies which perhaps are not obliged to do that, but they are nevertheless involved in the supply chain. Reporting, well, evaluation of impacts, risks and opportunities. Well, the economic aspect is no longer mentioned because it will be integrated into the economic balance sheet. So the idea is that of having a single integrated document. In terms of the value chain, Well, the two directives say that information has to be given about the value chain. And for the first 3 years, if there is no information available, the company has to demonstrate the efforts made in order to get those data. And then they have to specify the plans for the future. So it's not enough to say, my suppliers do not have this type of information. You have to stimulate them and force them or push them to provide this information in order then to be all responsible for this procedure. I like to close with the famous sentence by Kofi Annan, who at the beginning of the 20th century said, our biggest challenge in this new century is to adopt an idea which seems abstract, but which is not, that is sustainable development. So this is an element that is absolutely necessary in all companies, independently of the size. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Balzan. And this is the end of our presentations and the end of the 20th edition of JTF. But before closing, let me see if there are any questions. Questions or remarks? If not, I would like to thank, first of all, our speakers, then our audience, and I would like to remind you that some refreshments are offered outside, so we can all break for coffee. Thank you very much, and see you next year.